Cape Breton University has been in the business of tourism for about 40 years, meaning one of our first programming was in hospitality and management and has continued. There have been many, many, many graduates, successful graduates from that program. When the university embarked upon its current strategic plan, and the president went around to all areas of Cape Breton Island, one of the things he heard consistently was, how can Cape Breton University help economic development and diversification on Cape Breton Island generally, and what more can it do in the tourism sector? So we had discussions about that, meaning in addition to the program that we have, what else could we do and where were there missing gaps? So we proposed and developed the World Tourism Institute, which incidentally, which intrigued me, when I proposed that name, more than a few people said, well, you can't call it the World Tourism Institute. That's too lofty a name. And I said, well, tourism is a world industry. We're regularly ranked as the #1 island destination in North America and in the top 10 in the world. Therefore, I do mean to say the World Tourism Institute because it's a global industry, and Cape Breton Island is a significant part of that. So, but there were significant gaps in research. It's very difficult to get specific research about the sector on Cape Breton Island. And if you are thinking of investing here, well, you want as much information as you can about the sector, the growth, the market. There's a lot of information, but getting it specific to Cape Breton Island is a challenge. So we said we would start looking at doing Cape Breton Island specific tourism research, and also that we would look at new program development, that we would talk to industry and say, okay, what do you most need to help you grow your sector? I mean, they're going to say money. We're not in the money business, but I mean as far as human resource development is concerned. An example, which might seem small, now that we have such a chronic labor shortage, one of the things in a community consultation, the sector said to us, your students are wonderful. We take as many as we can get for summer placement, but they go back to school in September. That's only halfway through our season. When they leave us, like, you know, what do we do? Well, can you change things? Now, changing a program at a university is not the easiest thing in the world. But anyway, the faculty in the Bachelor of Hospitality and Tourism Management, BHTM, looked at the program and said, we could change the schedule and leave students out on work placement, which is required in that program. Leave them out into at least until Thanksgiving, so that for the sector, they have staff for the 4 months that they most need them, and the students are getting valuable work experience, which is required. So that was one of these. It was, to me, an illustration it's possible to have a win-win. The industry said, if only you could change what you do, we'd have access to more employees. And of course, and we said, well, we require all of our students to have work experience, which gives them better job opportunities. So that was an example of listening to what people said they wanted to happen and us being able to do it. Now, our students are not going to solve the labor shortage on Cape Breton Island because there are hundreds of vacant jobs, and our students are in demand everywhere, on Cape Breton Island and at major resorts in Canada and internationally. But it's an example of of the connection that CBU has always had with the industry, and where possible tries to adapt and fill those gaps. So hopefully the World Tourism Institute does that. And we have completed 3 different conferences, some quite local issues, a recent international one, which was in part focused on labor shortages and solutions around the world. So we will continue to do that. And again, CBU has always been incredibly connected to Mi'kmaq communities in Unama'ki, Cape Breton Island, but elsewhere in the entire region. And we are working with those communities who have an interest in developing Mi'kmaq cultural tourism programs, academic programs. So that process is underway. And hopefully the next time you do an interview, I'll tell you that we have a successful program that we are pleased to offer. I'm Dr. Keith Brown. I've been at Cape Breton University for 32 years, usually in a senior admin role, Vice President International, Vice President Aboriginal Affairs, Vice President External. But I've always taught during that time. I always taught in the BBA program, part-time, and then I started teaching in the MBA program, part-time, and I really enjoyed it. So in the last 3 or 4 years, I've been a full-time professor in the MBA program in Community Economic Development, teaching international business and strategic management, and doing research in the cultural area, tourism area, in cultural tourism. And before that, I was the vice president with the Cape Breton Development Corporation and the director of tourism. So some of that history that I told you about, I lived part of that history with many other people, but so that's what I've always been interested in tourism.